Shabbat Shalom, Kol Halal, Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shah, Bahashem Kodash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of GMS, including the elders that came before them that taught us this truth. Shabbat Shalom and salutations to all the brothers that push the word in truth and in sincerity, the hopeful elect tabernacle of David, the Akwath that are listening and learning and being a pillar of rest, the 144,000, the one-third, the hopeful elect of Israel. I'm the brother Yahshua. I'm back with the World War III Daily Update. Shabbat Shalom and salutations to you as well. We're going to start right here at Joel 3 and 2, and we're going to talk about the Middle East. All right. So we'll read it in the King James as we do first. I, the Most High, will also gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Yehoshaphat. Jehoshaphat or Yehoshaphat means God's judgment. The Most High's name is Yahweh. Shaphat means judgment, God's judgment, and will plead with them there for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land. He gave you the reason why he's going to do this. This is World War III. This is the Battle of Armageddon. I will gather and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat and will plead with them there. In other words, let's read it here. He's going to ambush who? I will gather the armies of the world. Okay? He's setting up an ambush. Who is he? The Most High, God. Yahweh. Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shah. He's going to gather the armies of the world into the valley of Jehoshaphat. There will I judge them. There will I put them on trial for what they did. Right? We won't get into what they did, but here's why. The nations of the world, right? The armies of the nations of the world. In order to punish the nations of the world, first thing you got to do is eliminate their military. Okay? To take away their strength, their teeth, if you will. All right? I will enter into judgment with them there. All right? Plead with them. What else do we have? Enter into judgment. Judgment, trial, plead your case. You're on trial. And guess what? You done did so much wickedness. Execute judgment. What's the penalty? Execution. Judge. Plead. Bring charges against those nations. You understand? This is the real judge. Yahweh Shai is Slakia. Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai is the real judge. Plead with them. Judge them. Set out my case against them. All right? In judgment, enter into judgment. Judgment. Plead. Okay? So here's what's going on. Okay? So this is in the Middle East. The War of Armageddon, the last battle, is when the Most High gathers the armies of the world, right? World War III is kicking. And then for some reason, everybody's going to wind up in the Middle East. And what's going to happen? The judgment, right, is death. All right? And if we go to Revelation, we see the same thing. We see the outcome, if you will. But first they have to be led there. They have to be tricked into walking into the ambush. The Most High is an expert. First of all, he's the supreme warrior. Right? He's a man of war. He's the supreme being. He's the supreme, not the ultimate warrior. He's the supreme warrior. All right? Right here in Revelation 19, okay, we have what? 19 and 19. And I saw the beast and the kings of the earth, right? And their armies gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse and against his army. God sent his son, the one that sat on the horse, and the angels to do what? To take down. Now we go back to Joel. All right, to do this. He gathered them in the Middle East, and the judge, who's going to judge and make war? Now we go back to Revelation, and it says this, the rider on the white horse. And I saw heaven opened, and behold, the white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness doth he what? Judge and make war. This is talking about his son, the Most High's son, Yahushua, who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ. Okay, what is he going to do? Judge and make war, which is part of the judgment. Okay, is to take them down. Right here, right? The kings of the earth and their armies. This is the same thing as in Joel. I will gather the army of Yahushua, God's judgment, and judge them. How? By taking them, by disintegrating them, turning them into dust. Go right here. Let's just read 11. 2 Ezra 13 and 11. And they were all mixed together, the blast of fire, the flaming breath, and the great tempest, and fell with violence upon the multitude which was prepared to fight. These are all the armies of the world. This is that fight in Revelation 19. And burned them up every one, so that upon a sudden of an innumerable multitude, nothing was to be perceived, but only dust and smell of smoke. So there's the judgment. Judgment is you'll be turned into dust and smell of smoke. When I saw this, I was afraid. So how close are we? All right. How close are we? Watchman with Eric Steckelneck one day ago, Israel or Israeli Mossad chief threatens Iran's leaders. Warns of Russia-Iran alliance, which is Ezekiel 38. Okay? It's all in there. All right? The Russian-Iran alliance is in Ezekiel 38. Okay? Let's get it real quick. Russia are the Medes or Magog in this situation. Ezekiel 38, and 2, Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog. Read that in the KJV. The land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against them. So Magog is, the land of Magog, Salakia, is Russia. Okay? And then it jumped down to 5. Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them. With who? With the Russians. Who's Persia? Iran. And there you have it. Okay? Be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee. Who is that? Iran, assembled unto Russia. And be thou a guard unto them. So there it is. That's simple. Now let's listen to Steckelneck and see what he has to say. Take it away, Eric.
Today on the newscast, the head of Israel's Mossad has a growing military alliance between the Iranian regime and Russia and how it threatens Israel. Get all the breaking details next. Eric Stackpik here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. We begin this new week with a very important speech by the head of Israel's Mossad spy agency, David Barnea. Now, Barnea gave this speech yesterday, Sunday, September 10th, in Herzliya, Israel, at a counterterrorism conference. And folks, there were so many headlines out of this address that we're going to break it today into three categories that you need to know about. Number one, Barnea said since the beginning of this year alone that the Mossad has broken up no less than 27 Iranian terror plots against Israelis and Jews around the world. Number two, he levied what I consider a direct threat at Iran's regime, specifically what he called the highest echelon of Iran's leadership. And number three, Barnea voiced great concern about an issue we've been covering extensively here on the newscast over the past several months, that growing military alliance between the Iranian regime and Russia, the quid pro quo, and how it directly threatens the state of Israel. We're going to break it down in a minute. Before I do, quick reminder to subscribe to the Watchman News channel right here on YouTube and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. And much more importantly, folks, it's been 22 years since the horrific 9/11 terror attacks, and we're remembering the victims today. May their memories be a blessing, and we're praying for their loved ones who are still here, those who were left behind. We will never forget what happened on that day 22 years ago today. Far too many have. Here at the Watchman Newscast, we never will. Let's start with David Barnea's address about these issues and the world's number one state sponsor of terrorism, the Iranian regime. Hey,
But wait a minute. Iran didn't do 9/11. Iraq didn't do 9/11. Afghanistan didn't do 9/11. And the Saudi Arabians, if anybody should have been attacked, if the Saudis did it, why didn't they go directly to Saudi Arabia, where Osama bin Laden is from? If you look up the hijackers, they're all from Saudi Arabia. Not all, maybe one or two or not, but the majority of them are from Saudi Arabia. Why didn't you go directly to Saudi Arabia, say screw the oil deal, and start bombing there? That's your first clue as to who actually did all of those. Did Osama do it? They didn't go to Saudi Arabia. Yeah, but he was in Tora Bora. Okay. They did it to themselves. So who's the terrorist? If the United States brought down their own buildings, which is what we know, never forget that they brought down their own building, all right, then who's the terrorist? Okay. Who is at the head of ISIS, ISIL, all of these boogeymen? Who created these boogeymen? See? With this full thing.
One, as I mentioned, folks, 27 plots around the world since January 1st, 2023. He said that these plots and the orders, the directives, are coming straight from Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. So that's one big takeaway. Number two, the global reach of these plots. Hey, I'm thinking just off the top of my head, Greece, Cyprus, Turkey, Azerbaijan over the past few months, terror plots broken up in these countries. And in previous years, the Iranian regime has made attempts against Israeli embassies, consulates in places like India, in Europe, and beyond as well. But this year, 27. And David Barnea, the head of the Mossad, said it's a noticeable uptick. The Iranian regime is growing more bold and more determined in their efforts, their attempts to strike Israeli and Jewish interests around the world. And again, directives coming straight from the supreme leader, which brings us to the second point. He levied, again, what I consider a direct threat to Iran's regime. He said, look, we're tracking right now, he said, in real time, these Iranian and Iranian-sponsored terror cells around the world that are attempting to carry out these attacks. But number two, we will target their handlers. He was very clear about that, the handlers for these cells. And also, there are handlers of the handlers. And that means what he called the highest echelon of the Iranian regime, putting Tehran on notice to the point where he said, and I quote, "We will strike if we need to. If any Jews or Israelis are killed, especially folks with the high holidays coming up, more on that in a few minutes." But he said, "We will strike," quote, "in the very heart of Tehran."
No, that sounds more like a plan to me. Let's get this real quick. What's this guy's name? Here's the plan. And here's who they want to take down. Let's see. I forget 7 countries. U.S. plans for 7 countries. Counties, countries. General Wesley Clark. Okay, so if you're an Iranian or a Persian, if you will, and you see this, all right, because this guy, let's watch it again. This guy just spoke of all of these different plans that Iran has to do whatever. Let's check it out. Listen to this. Bear with me while I find it.
Here at the Watchman Newscast, we never will. Let's start with David Barnea's address about these issues and the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, the Iranian regime.
Wrong. That would be Babylon the Great, the good old U.S. of A.
Hey, #1, as I mentioned, folks, 27 plots around the world since January 1st, 2023. He said that these plots and the orders, the directives, are coming straight from Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. So that's one big takeaway. #2, the global reach of these plots. Hey, I'm thinking just off the top of my head, Greece, Cyprus, Turkey, Azerbaijan.
Now let's watch the real terrorists. 07.
Do you see?
Come on now. Come on, devil. You know what's going on here.
The media.
So I'm going to start it again. Here's the plots.
Do you see a replay of what happened in the lead up to the war with Iraq? The allegations of the weapons of mass destruction, the media leaping on to the bandwagon.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the joint staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?"
Why? Because they didn't do 9/11.
Said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess..."
So who's the terrorist?
The only tool you have is a hammer. Every problem has to look like a nail. So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper. He said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today. And he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years."
Okay, now here's the question. Who has Iran bombed? crickets, right? Iran ain't bombed nobody. So these plans were made a long time ago, and they made good on as many of those countries as they can. It's already been done. Okay? These people make good on their plans.
Starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran. This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq.
My fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
Who had absolutely nothing to do with 9/11.
And then Syria.
We had a chance to talk about a wide range of international issues, including the situation in Syria. And I have to say that all of us who've been seeing the terrible pictures coming out of Syria and Homs recently recognize it is absolutely imperative for the international community to rally and send a clear message to President Assad that it is time for a transition. It is time for that regime to move on, and it is time to stop the killing of Syrian citizens by their own government.
Lebanon.
Now, let me say this about Syria. The reason they got bogged down in Syria and are still fighting that same war right now is because Vladimir Putin and the Russians came down there and said, no, you're not. Keep that in mind.
They both had different reasons, the State Department and the White House, for wanting Israel to do it, encouraging them to do it, supporting them. Our Air Force worked very closely with the Israeli Air Force.
You hear this? You hear who they're mentioning right now?
Months before this, not necessarily with a deadline, knowing when it would happen. It was always going to be whenever there was an incident, they would take advantage of an incident. The word I used was fortunate timing. When Hezbollah grabbed some of the Israeli soldiers in early July, that was then a pretext, I think that's the only word, for a major offensive that had been in the works a long time.
Libya.
Today we can definitively say that the Gaddafi regime has come to an end. The last major regime strongholds have fallen. The new government is consolidating the control over the country, and one of the world's longest-serving dictators is no more.
Somalia.
Well, violence isn't only on the rise in Afghanistan. In fact, it looks like America's shadow wars have now increased by 1. Drone strikes have long been reported in Pakistan and Yemen, but now there's news that a week ago, a U.S. drone aircraft fired on 2 leaders of the Somali organization Al-Shabaab.
Sudan.
President Obama is sending 100 combat-equipped troops to Central Africa to advise local forces on getting rid of one of the continent's most vicious operatives, Joseph Kony, the head of the Lord's Resistance Army, a group responsible for atrocities across the region. It's the first open deployment of U.S. ground combat power to Africa since the Black Hawk Down incident in Somalia in the 1990s that killed 18 troops. U.S. troops may wind up now in Uganda, South Sudan, the Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It's part of a growing military effort to engage in Africa.
Finishing off Iran.
You can stop it right there. So you see who the real terrorist is. Okay? And the truth is just the truth. Now, back to this guy. All right? What's going on now? Who's actually making good on so-called threats? Let's look at the track record. Let's look at the facts.
Past few months, terror plots broken up in these countries, and in previous years, the Iranian regime has made attempts against Israeli embassies, consulates in places like India, in Europe, and beyond as well. But this year, 27, and David Barnea, the head of the Mossad, said it's a noticeable uptick. The Iranian regime is growing more bold and more determined in their efforts, their attempts to strike Israeli and Jewish interests around the world. And
they ain't done nothing to nobody.
Directives coming straight from the supreme leader, which brings us to the second point. He levied again what I consider a direct threat to Iran's regime. He said, look, we're tracking right now, he said, in real time, these Iranian and Iranian-sponsored terror cells around the world that are attempting to carry out these attacks. But number two, we will target their handlers. He was very clear about that, the handlers for these cells. And also, there are handlers of the handlers. And that means what he called the highest echelon of the Iranian regime, putting Tehran on notice to the point where he said, and I quote, "We will strike if we need to. If any Jews or Israelis are killed, especially folks with the high holidays coming up, more on that in a few minutes." But he said, "We will strike," quote, "in the very heart of Tehran." So the regime clearly on notice, not that they've gotten the memo in the past because they continue in their wicked behavior, but nonetheless, folks, look at the track record. I think of November
Look at the track record.
2020, and the head, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the head of Iran's nuclear program, really the godfather of Iran's nuclear weapons program, was eliminated on Iranian soil by the Mossad. And
Okay, so let's stop right there. Let's pull out Iran or Persia. Let's pull out everybody that they have invaded, attacked. Let's put it all on paper and see who that is. Like we just did with Babylon the Great. Okay? So, come on now. Come on, the great deceiver. We see what's going on. Anyway, let's get back to the program here. Let's close this out. What do we see going on? Joel 3. Let's go over that again. I will also gather all nations, Joel 3 and 2, and bring them down into the valley of Jehoshaphat. This is what the Most High is doing, right? Because the Most High is the master of ambushes, right? This is an ambush. Bear with me on this. Okay? When the Most High took down Pharaoh, right, there was a war. All right? This is an ambush. We haven't done this in a while. Got Yahushua right here. You got Moses, right? You got the strike zone. This is the kill zone of an ambush. What did Moses do? He used the children of Israel as bait, marched them through. Pharaoh said, "Get them niggas." Ran down into the strike zone, and then what happened? He unleashed the ammunition. Here's the ammunition, the water. It's a classic ambush. Well, that's what this is. The Most High is the king of ambush. Sun Tzu ain't got a damn thing. Joel 3 and 2 in the NLT. I will gather the armies of the world into an ambush. The valley of Jehoshaphat. He gathered the Egyptian army right into the kill zone. Get it? So this is what we see going on. Anyway, letting us know that we're at the end. This is the final war. Armageddon is the final battle. All right? So we're getting there. All right? So repent now and be converted. With that, we hope that the elect will edify you, brothers and sisters, with that. We're going to say Shabbat Shalom.